Sylvia, yes.
Is she the only person or as well?
No, well, we have 82 participants online.
I mean, the Sylvia and her co-facilitator.
Ah, yes, okay, just, I know that, just a second here.
So I start now. All right.
Yeah.
Good afternoon from Accra, Ghana. I would like to welcome all participants to the virtual work group on issues of concern and taking the opportunity to say Happy New Year, Happy 2021 to all of you since we haven't met this year. So just want to recall our first two meetings of this group. First, we had our maiden meeting on 28 November 2020, and the second meeting took place also on 14 December 2020. And I'm sure you are all aware of our mandate, is to make proposals that progress the work on this topic in lead up to IP4, building on Annex B of SciChem/IP.4/2 on compilation of recommendations. The special tasks include review of Annex B of SciChem IP4/2 and identify possibilities to compromise or alternative text in areas of divergence or identify gaps. Also, to develop proposals for draft procedures for the identification, nomination, selection, review, and prioritization of the issues of concern, determining the need for further work on the issues of concern and duration for considering issues of concern, drawing on experiences from existing one, and then finally develop proposals on how to deal with existing emerging policy issues and other issues of concern. And we know that this has also possible links to the science policy interface and the subsidiary and ad hoc bodies. So if I may give the objectives for today's meeting, our third meeting today, January 18th, is to present the proposal from co-facilitators, myself and my colleague, Mr. Sverre Thomas Jare from Norway. And I must apologize, perhaps he's still finding it difficult to join the meeting, but I'm welcome all on his behalf as well. So before we move on, we are supposed to present a proposal on the process to address issues of concern under the Beyond 2020 framework. And I would like to now introduce the agenda for the day. So I'll kindly ask the Secretariat to share on the screen the agenda for the day, if Brenda, you have it.
Yes, Sam, the agenda for today is on the screen. And it's also available to participants.
Unfortunately, I'm not seeing
the Working Group page.
Well, I'm not seeing on the screen, but I will read from my notes. So I'll mention the agenda. So first of all, the first item is the welcoming remarks, which I have given already. And also I'm now reviewing, yes, it's now on the screen. I'm reviewing the meeting agenda and the objectives. And then we will look at the updates on progress made under the virtual working group 1 regarding the targets for strategy objective C. So the co-facilitators of the working group 1, Sylvia and her colleague, I believe, are part of this meeting today to take that one up. Then we will have an overview of the co-facilitators proposal and the process for issues of concern, which was released on 11th January 2021. And then hopefully my colleague Thomas will take that one up. And then we'll continue our discussion on the document itself, on the outline, and then we will review the proposal, the proposed process with respect to the title, the definition, the submission of information, nomination, selection, and adoption process. And then finally, look at the mechanisms for implementation. The last item on the agenda will be the linkage to the existing emerging policy issues and other issues of concern, which also be taken up with by my colleague. Finally, we'll consider the next steps, and then hopefully we'll close the meeting. So, on that note, I'd like to thank you once again for joining. I'm told that we have close to about 90 participants for today's meeting. So I'd like to thank all of you for your commitment and your interest shown so far in our group. Well, so without much ado, I would like to now hand over the microphone to Sylvia, the chair or the co-facilitator of the working group 1 on indicators targets. Sylvia, if you're around, please, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, dear Sam, for the introduction. We wanted to briefly give you an update. Those of you, I know some of you might be working in more than one group, so you might be aware of what is going on in our group. But just to be sure that we have interlinkages, we wanted to make a brief presentation on the progress we've made in our group. So I'll ask the Secretariat to, yes, thank you very much. So what we've been working on which is directly related to the work that you're dealing with on issues of concern, is looking at the targets that are under Strategic Objective C. And just as a reminder, here you have the Objective C as it is currently the draft wording we have now for it, and the specific considerations that were under this strategic objective. So as you can see, it is directly related to issues of concern and the way that they are identified, prioritized, and addressed under the future instrument. Next slide, please. So we've been working on the targets under each strategic objective very similarly, and this also relates to the 2 targets that are currently under the strategic objective C. We've been working on the basis of the IP4/3 document, which has come from the technical working group that was looking at targets, indicators, and milestones last year. And we've been trying to build upon this to clarify the targets, also in relation to those that are under strategic objectives related to issues of concern. The approach that we have been using is having general discussions, which have been followed up by written submissions on the Strategic Objective C. During this process, we had an additional 4 new targets proposed. Then we had more discussions and more written submissions, and we developed facilitative tables for our discussions. And our last meeting will take place on the 1st of February. We'll be trying to finalize as much as possible our discussion on targets, including those related to issues of concern, and also to identify a way forward, as that has been part of our mandate given by the Bureau, is to also propose a way forward. So in regards to the specific targets under Strategic Objective C, if I can ask for the next slide, there have been various considerations that our group has come to, and we thought it would be interesting for you to reflect upon these, perhaps, if it's useful in your further deliberations. So one of these is that we have come to the conclusion that we feel that we can very much benefit from the deliberations that you are having in your group, and thus we are looking at linking our work to the results of yours. So we feel that it's important that we formulate our targets after the results of your deliberations have been completed. The second is that we're looking at these two targets that were originally set under Strategic Objective C, and also the new targets that are proposed by our participants, that we definitely see that it's necessary to have less process-orientated formulation on these targets, and they have to be flexible enough to encompass future decisions made on the IOCs by the conference. And as I understand, you've also had discussions on this. So on the process-orientated side of IOCs, we see that there is an opportunity perhaps to look at different formulations that are related to IOCs that are related to process-orientated. So not looking specifically at targets related to specific IOCs and the different milestones that they might need to be achieved as results, but looking at different work plans or legislation, we see that perhaps those kinds of targets could be made more general and be put under different strategic objectives, not specifically under the Strategic Objective C. And then what we've also discussed is that the IOC indicators that would be related to the target under Objective C could be incorporated by reference. So as the instrument and the stakeholders determine specific needs for IOCs and the need for them to be tracked and for them to be dealt with, they could be incorporated by reference into the indicator framework as it is developed. So those are our general reflections. I hope that might be helpful, and we look forward to hearing how things are going for you at the end of this meeting, so that we can continue our work as well under this strategic objective. And thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you, and I hope you have a successful deliberations today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sylvia, for the kindness to join our group today. Perhaps before we leave you, we'll ask participants if they have one or two questions for you for clarification or for further elaboration. So Brenda, can you help find out who want to ask some few questions?
So just to recall, use the chat button or the hand up button if you'd like to ask a question. And if you don't have access to your hand up button, you can just type your name in the chat to request a chance to speak. Maybe just using a speak. So I don't see any hands up at the moment, Sam, so maybe just give it a minute or so, but I think Sylvia's presentation was quite clear.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see any hands up, so.
Okay, so thank you so much, Sylvia. I think we are all working together, so we fully get to our preferred destination as we move on. So going back to our agenda, we now have agenda 3, which is the overview of the co-facilitated proposal and the process for issues of concern, which we released on 11/2021. And I would like to call on my colleague, Thomas, to take us through that aspect. Thomas, are you ready? Is Thomas ready?
I'm ready. Do you hear me now?
Yeah. Go ahead, yes.
Okay, good, thank you. Sorry for the technical problems. I hope this works now. Thank you very much, Sam, for the introduction. Thank you also to Sylvia for your presentation or overview of what's happening in the virtual working group number 1. Now, what you have in front of you for this meeting and what will take most of our time today is the proposed way forward on the process for issues of concern under the new instrument. That's part A and B of the Virtual Working Group 3 mandate, as you saw earlier today when Sam reiterated that. Now, it was released on the 11th of January. Sorry for a slight delay, but you've still had approximately 1 week. I hope that's enough. It has been produced by and prepared by Sam and myself, and it's based on the compilation document Annex P, which was sort of the starting point for this discussion. And then we've also looked at Resolution 2/4 from ICCM2, and the meetings that we've had to date, and the written submissions that we have received. The proposal was set out in section 3 of the document that you have seen, that has been sent to you. And I would like to stress that the purpose of this meeting is not in any way to finalize the text on issues of concern, but it is to pave the way for negotiations at IP4. So this is just a step on the way. And we have, as I said, we've built on the available documentation, on the documents and the submissions that we received, and we've attempted to simplify the text and identify possibilities for compromise or alternative text in areas of divergence as per the mandate of our virtual working group. We hope that the text, as it is set now in Annex section 3 of the document, is more accessible and can facilitate the negotiations at IP4. And then a note on the existing emerging policy issues. You will remember that those were discussed on the 14th of December. We have received written input from several stakeholders. The participants in our meeting on the 14th of December agreed that at that time that the proposed process for the issues of concern under the new instrument, the Beyond 2020 instrument, required further discussion. And we will then revert to that issue at the very end of our meeting today. If I could have the next slide then, please. So here again, you see a list of the submissions that were received by the 6th of November, and that those are the written submissions that we've based our document on, in addition then, of course, to the discussions that we had. Next slide, please. So some general reflections. The process should be simple, it should be inclusive and transparent. And in moving forward, we also note that the process needs to have greater ownership and enhanced implementation. Those are two of perhaps the main lessons learned from the experience so far under SICAM. And the process then also needs to include consideration of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the SDG goals. And then finally, consideration will still need to be given to the linkages to any science policy interface. Obviously, that is something still to be discussed. The proposed strategic objective C on the issues of concern. We've already been into those. And then reporting under mechanisms to support implementation. And section G in the text today states that every third year, the conference will evaluate progress on the issues of concern and recommend changes to the programs of work if necessary. Obviously, that is something that will need to be, potentially changed to reflect the discussions in our group and at IP4. Next slide, please. So here you have an overview then again of the structure in the co-facilitators' proposed outline. And we will go through these parts then in detail in this meeting. When we set together this document, the objective was to avoid duplications and to move to a structure of the text that reflects the process for nominating the issues of concern. The major change in our proposed outline compared to previous documents is the structure. We have not intended to make any substantial changes to the text, but there are then two exceptions to that. The first one is that we propose to delete the criteria which were in Annex B. Many participants noted that the criteria originally set out in Annex B of the compilation document were duplicative of the text and were generally captured under the information requirements. A few stakeholders noted the importance of criteria to avoid a proliferation of issues beyond the means and resources of the Beyond 2020 instrument. And we believe that the process itself and the considerations of the conference will avoid having too many issues of concern. The second change is the introduction of the multi-stakeholder committees to guide the efforts and implementation of each issue of concern. And when introducing that element, we have, of course, seen that has been presented by some in their submissions, some stakeholders in their submissions, but we've also been inspired by the working groups under the for the Basel Convention partnerships. So this is an element which is not completely unfamiliar to many of the stakeholders. Next slide, please. So this is an attempt from our side to show you what this process would look like. If we focus on the blue part first, you will have the proponent or the proponents who nominates the issue and submits then a nomination at least 6 months prior to the conference and then to the Secretariat. The Secretariat will then check nominations for completeness and prepare a consolidated list of nominations. Indeed, there may not be many, there may not only be one or indeed none at all. That remains to be seen. And then it's for the conference to consider, nominate and adopt resolutions on issues with priority activities and timelines. So the conference would then clearly set out the priority activities and timelines, the deliverables, if you will. The conference will also then establish the Multi-Stakeholder Committee for that issue of concern to guide implementation on the issue. And then determine the need for further work on an issue. But that is perhaps, after, it is not perhaps, it is when an issue of concern has been, how can I say, in effect, has been working. The stakeholders have been working on an issue of concern for a time, and then the conference may then determine the need for further work. Then we move to the green part, and I see that what I dealt with at the very last part of the conference should perhaps have been in green as well. But the Multi-Stakeholder Committee will then guide the effort and implementation of every issue. There will be one committee, that is our proposal, for every issue. It will agree on a work plan based on the priority activities and timelines from the conference, so the deliverables set out by the conference, and it will report back to the conference on the progress of that implementation. And the Secretariat will then support the work of the Multi-Stakeholder Committee. Next slide, please. So that is then an overview of our proposal so far. And as I said, we will then go into each of the letters here, A, B, C, and D, afterwards. But first of all, it would be useful to have from your side any general views on this proposed outline. And then perhaps in particular the structure of our proposal before we then move into the definitions, the submission of information, and so on. So if you have any specific comments to the text itself, you may save those for later in the meeting. But for now, it would be useful to know if any of you have any immediate views on the proposed outline. Brenda, would you be able to take the...
Yes, of course. I can take the reminder to put your hands up for floor, or to just mark in the chat function if you wish to speak. Okay, so I have one person requesting the floor already. So that is Laura Nazef from the USA. Hi, Laura.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Brenda. Hi, Thomas and Sam. We really very much appreciate the work that you've done to develop this process, and we think it really significantly improves on the original text in Annex B. Just a note, as you've heard from us before, including issues of interest along with issues of concern would encourage a focused effort on additional solutions and innovation. And also, we think this would be a positive approach that would help to engage the participation of additional stakeholders in the Beyond 2020 instrument. And then just a couple of small points, I guess, on the introduction and reflections in your process and your proposal. There's a sentence at the end of your introduction talking about issues of concern should be reviewed for continued relevance. And we think just acknowledging that following a determination by the International Conference of the need for further work, then they would be integrated. And then as well, just a point that there's a sentence that said that the process needs to include consideration of the 2030 agenda. And we think this should include a consideration of the 2030 agenda. Just making those points in case this proposal goes forward to IP4, and wanted to reflect that. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. So I see Matthias from the EU would like the floor. I saw Sheila from ICCA, but her hand went down, so I just want to acknowledge that. Sheila, maybe put your hand back up if you'd like the floor. We'll turn first to Matthias, followed by Carolyn Vickers from the WHO.
Thanks, Brenda, and hello to everybody. Yeah, the EU and its member states also appreciate and support the proposal for the future structure, and want to thank the co-facilitators for the work done. With regard to the comment made by the US before, mentioning also the issues of interest, we do disagree with it at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthias. We have Carolyn Vickers, WHO, followed by Auden from Norway, followed by Sheila from the ICCA. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Thanks, Brenda, and hello, everyone. A number of the IOMC organizations have coordinated on the proposal, and my colleagues may speak to certain issues later on. But just at the start, we'd like to make a couple of general comments. Firstly, the procedure is extremely well detailed, if I could say that, in the sense that there's information there on the times that things will be done and the details of procedures. And we're thinking that this is probably too detailed for an instrument that will be difficult to change. It would be more relevant to have that procedures adopted by the ICCM by decision, and then it would be more easily changed based on experience. We note that there's no place in the text to put it. It doesn't foresee the role, for example, of an OEWG, which might be very useful in prior consideration of proposals. Secondly, turning to the issue of the implementation, the committees, we want to query the feasibility of the proposals that the committees would guide implementation of the work plans, because that would be a new task for the SciComm Secretariat, and we think that it would involve a significant increase in resources particularly if the Secretariat is to take over leading the work on the existing EPIs. Currently, the IOMC organisations and other organisations play this role, and we do find that it requires significant resources. So we'd encourage people to think about this more deeply. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. We have Auden from Norway, followed by Sheila from ICCA, followed by Matthias Bastos. Go ahead, Auden.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the co-chairs for this useful compromise text. Thanks to the Secretariat for your recent efforts, and also thank you to the whole group for the discussions that have led to this text. From the Norwegian side, we are in general happy with the co-chair's proposal. We see this as a more manageable text with a good structure. It is starting from a well-known procedure, and we are amending certain points that where revisions are justified. So we see this as a good outcome for from the virtual working group process to IP4. We note that multi-stakeholder committees have been brought in as a new term, and modalities for establishment of such committees must be considered at some stage. On the title, we would prefer a broader term, like issues for common action, for example. If we compare issues of concern with emerging policy issues, then we see the emerging policy issues as a broader term, and as it is not only focused on concerns. For example, it can be difficult to include topics such as chemicals in products and nanomaterials, as these are not necessarily a concern. They just need a good management system in order to prevent problems from happening. So we would prefer a more broad term. We would also like to have issues for common action, as we see action as a very important word in the title, as action is what we really would need more of. Thank you.
Thank you, Auden. We next have Sheila from ICCA, followed by Matthias Bastos, followed by Lillian Cora. Go ahead, Sheila.
Thank you. We also appreciate and thank you all for the work done by the co-facilitators and the Secretariat. We generally also think that the text has much improved and we can support in general. One point we would like to stress and highlight is that the prioritization of issues appears to be missing from section C, the nomination, selection, and adoption of the process. This is really important given that we already have the emerging issues of concern and that there might be a number of issues. So maybe that specific aspect of prioritization should be added. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Next, we have Matthias Bastos. Could you please also identify your organization, Matthias? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Matthias Bastos, and I speak on behalf of the Brazilian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. First of all, I would like to express our thanks to the co-facilitators for the hard work that has been done so far. We don't see major issues on the structure of the proposed outline, although we think there's still room for improvement in some parts of it. Regarding item 3 from the general reflections that mentions section G from the virtual working group 2 on governance, we would just like to suggest the suppression of such reference since it is no longer under consideration in those precise terms regarding the reporting process. And also, we do appreciate the presentation from the virtual working group 1 representative, and as much as we think that there's a clear correspondence of subjects among the groups, and they should be addressed in a joint manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthias. We then have Lillian Cora. Please go ahead, Lillian.
Yes, good morning, everybody. I represent the International Society of Doctors for the Environment, and I have another hat that is the Global Alliance on Health and Pollution. And I want to make a reflection based in the experience we already gained working in issues of concern or emerging issues in the past years under this in this environment. And we all learn that we have and we need different financing and professional resources depending on the nature of each of the issues of concern or emerging issues in the past. And maybe we need further discussion about what kind of approach we have to give if we really need groups, multi-stakeholder committees, that sometimes can be problematic, not only because of the demand of resources, but also the demand of time that sometimes with the demand of capacity of the different organizations, also from the Secretariat. So maybe we should leave this item open and to be decided by ICCM, depending on the nature of the issue to approach. I think that we don't have all the elements at this moment to decide, and we don't know exactly, because this is the nature, issues of concern or emerging issues. So we don't know exactly what may be the urgency or what is the complexity of the issue. So I think we have to leave this open to ICCM to decide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lillian. I don't see any other hands up. Just a reminder for people to take your hands down once you've spoken. Anyone else wishing to take the floor? I see Sayed Mahdi. Please go ahead and please identify what organization you represent. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda, for giving me the floor. I'm representing the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as the national focal point of chemical conventions. With regards to first of all, I would like to appreciate the co-facilitators for the work they have done so far. With regards to the committee, or I see in the option 2 of the proposal to establishing a group, I'm not sure that the mandate of the virtual working groups allows us to establish any group or committee, having in mind that the main goal behind forming virtual working groups is to enhance understanding among SciChem's stakeholders. So sometimes I see that we are trying to have a clean text, or we are trying to propose establishing a group or a committee, or to have a clean text. I think it would complicate the discussion in the IP4. Otherwise, we should get the authorization from the Bureau of SciChem. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. The next speaker I have is Michelle Sheeran, Switzerland, followed by South Africa. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you very much, Brenda, and hello to all participants from Switzerland. I would like to start by thanking the co-chairs for providing this document. We think it's very helpful. We are content with this document. We think it reflects well discussions that took place in this group so far, and written submissions. We think it's a good structure. We recognize the effort to be close to the discussions, but also existing text of SciChem and drafts that we were working on so far. And so we think it is a good outcome of this virtual working group, and will be very useful to IP4, and we generally support this document. One thing that would have merited being addressed in a better way in the document, in our review, is relates to the existing emergency policy issues and other issues of concern. under the future instrument, as this was discussed by the virtual working group in December, in addition to the call for written submissions. And because this discussion is also linked to this review of Annex B, and as a common view was expressed that the existing EPIs and other issues should be reviewed for continued relevance and be integrated as issues of concern under the new instrument. So to take this up would provide more clarity, but in general, again, we are happy with this document. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. Next, I see Sandra Alvarez from UNEP, followed by Allison Kennedy from Canada. Go ahead, Sandra.
Thank you very much, Brenda, and thank you to the co-facilitators for putting up the draft. I just wanted to follow up on Caroline's intervention and highlight a couple of elements of the IOMC organizations proposal, some of the IOMC organizations that we do see reflected in this document from the co-facilitators, including ensuring that there's no delay or disruption to the work on addressing the existing emerging policy issues and other issues of concern, as well as looking into having emerging policy issues and other issues of concern being discussed and a decision taken for them and at ICCM 5 or at ICC 6, sorry, ensuring that they should be embedded in the new instrument and not be treated as a separate manner. So we very much welcome in the co-facilitator draft the initial general consideration. The main reason being to ensure consistency and to contribute that the progress of under issues of concern contribute to the objectives, the visions of the new instrument. We also would like to highlight and wonder how much details is needed to advance the agenda, and especially within the instrument, and would recommend a long-lasting framework having flexibility of flexible elements included. And finally, again, on the connection, we want to highlight that having connections with the new framework between the emerging policy issues, existing new issues of concern, as well as the relevant sections that are being discussed in other working groups, such as governance, monitoring and measuring progress, strategic objectives, targets and indicators, as well as financial consideration that we do not see highlighted at the moment in the proposal. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. Next, we have Allison Kennedy from Canada, followed by Augustin Hart. Go ahead, Allison.
Thank you. We wanted to thank the co-facilitators. Oh, I think my microphone is muted. Can you hear me?
We hear you well.
Perfect. Wanted to thank the co-facilitators for their thoughtful proposal. And overall, we see that it's a significant step forward, and we appreciate your efforts and the efforts of the working group and the progress that's been made. We'll give a few comments throughout the meeting on the particular elements of the proposal. One comment, though, I wanted to make just at the beginning, often we're hearing references to multi-stakeholder. I'm just encouraged that it's both multi-stakeholder and multi-sectoral. So I know it's easier just to say multi-stakeholder. It's a bit of a mouthful to say both every time, but it should be understood that it's both multi-stakeholder and multi-sectoral. So those are, we'll talk about a few of these as we go through. And one thing that obviously still needs to be considered is what happens next, what's next in the process, and the various timelines for some of the elements that are described here in this proposal. And so there's still a lot to be done there for unpacking. So some of that does come up here, but just wanted to give our opening views that we see overall quite a bit of progress has been made. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Next, we have Augustin Hart, followed by the UK, Claire Dixon. Go ahead, Augustin.
Thank you, Brenda. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to congratulate and thank the co-facilitators. I think this is a good compromise text and something good to continue the discussions. Actually, I want to raise a couple of points. One that it can be solved very easily on section C, II at the end. We see that Secretariat will compile the information for the new proposals. I think we are missing there that should be presented for consideration to the conference. So it is a simple step, but it's not mentioned there. And the other comment is on section D, and I want to echo some previous comments on some of the participants regarding support from the Secretariat on the implementation of the work plan and the funding that it may be required to do so. So that is an aspect that I don't see covered in the text, and will much appreciate on the following work. Thank you again.
Thank you, Augustin. Before I give the floor to Claire Dixon from the UK, I just note that South Africa, I believe it was Zuki and perhaps Dada as well, have both fallen off with the hand up function. So maybe just signal in the hand up if you still wish to speak, or if you took your hand down. I'll be waiting for your hand, either Dada and or Suki. Okay, great. I see Suki's put her hand up. So over to Claire Dixon, and then I'll give the floor to Zuki. Go ahead, Claire.
Yes, hi there. It's Claire Dixon from the UK here. Thank you very much to the co-facilitators for the proposals. I think, as people have said, it does make the text a lot clearer, and we are very content with a lot of the elements discussed within the group have been reflected really well in this text. But as previously mentioned by another speaker, I think that one thing that could be stronger in this text is the prioritization and the need to consider the issues in order of priority in some way. I think if we look at any of the previous feedback from the current framework and also the assessment report that was done by UNEP on the issues of concern, there's highlighted that there's a need to have a manageable number at any one time where the coordinated international action can have the greatest impact. So I think we feel there needs to be some more scientific scrutiny in the nomination process. So there's the multi-stakeholder groups that are mentioned, but I think that we need them to be participating before the nomination is and before the issue is adopted. So we need to know if there's definitive evidence to actually support the fact that it's a global issue and where it sits in terms of priority for action. So our view that was previously submitted was that the stakeholder committee could be developed and set up during the nomination stage and can both confirm the evidence base to support the nomination as an iterative process before the issue is actually adopted as an issue. Again, thinking about how to keep a manageable number of issues. This may also then consider the relative priority of the issues compared to those in the list to make sure that we are really focusing the efforts and resources on those that are the most important. As I said, we know that resources are a key factor in the lack of progress. So we can't really keep adding to the list and without thinking about the other issues in conjunction. And finally, just supporting the Norway view that we think the title could focus on action more. And we have previously suggested issues of concern that warrant global action. And it might be that it could be priority issues that warrant global action. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Next, I'll give the floor to Zuki from South Africa. Sorry that your name's dropped off, and then back to Olga. So next is Zuki.
Thank you, Brenda, for giving me the floor. First, I'd like to indicate I'm speaking on behalf of the African region, such as South Africa, and I'd like to express our appreciation to the co-facilitators for bringing us thus far. And without wasting any time, I'd like to fully support, without reiterating, so as to save time, the comments made by Switzerland and Sandra from UNEP. But also I'd like to add to indicate that we are not in support of establishing a small group or committee to further the work. The reason being, we would like to participate effectively in the bigger group and present our inputs and engage with others. And also, we acknowledge that there has been an option of written inputs, but also there is limitations with that, in the sense that you end up being at the mercy of the co-facilitators and the secretariat without necessarily the rest of the other stakeholders being able to hear directly and understand your input. So we're not in support of establishing a small group. We have serious challenges within the African group. We have mentioned in writing to the Secretariat the issue of clashes, not just amongst the virtual working groups of the SAICM, but also with the other relevant conventions like Minamata and BRS and UNEP, which unfortunately, unlike other countries whereby you have several people being assigned to those, with most of us, it's like, for me in South Africa, I'm the only one who's been attending all these international meetings in addition to national responsibilities. So it's a reality for us. And that compounded by limitations in terms of connectivity. Also, in terms of the title, would like the title to be action orientated, and also would appreciate whereby we're not just adding to the list, we would have to prioritize and also come up with a monitoring and evaluation mechanism in terms of progress. Yes, there is a recent report released in March by UNEP that indicates exactly what happened. Thank you. I'll end there for now.
Thank you, Zuki. Next, we have Olga Sporanskaya. And then I think we have Dada, and his hand fell down. Dada, please raise your hand, or if Zuki already captured comments. So first over to Olga.
Thank you very much, Brenda. So I'm talking on behalf of a group of NGOs. And first of all, we would like to thank the Secretariat for the paper that describes well the process. However, we believe that issues of concern are nominated to attract special attention at the global level. Not any issue should fall under this focused work. Otherwise, the whole idea of having a special attention to particular issues in the work of SAICM and its successor is problematic or just pointless. We also would like to highlight that chemicals and products, or nano, are connected with other issues of concern like toxic chemicals and electronics and EDCs. So they definitely need to stay as issues of concern, and there should be no delay in addressing these existing issues of concern. A group of NGOs suggested a set of criteria that could help evaluate the progress over the issues of concern implementation. And these criteria could be considered as a tool for further evaluation process. And I believe that everyone had a chance to look through these criteria, which we presented in Brazil, and also later as an information document to IP4. So it is online, SAICM online website. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga. I don't see that Dada raised his hand again, so I think Zuki has captured. Oh, Dada, please go ahead. I also had the same with Japan at one point asking the floor and their hand dropped. So first over to Dada, and then we'll see if Japan, please raise your hand again if you wish to speak, Japan. Go ahead, Dada.
Oh, thank you very much. I hope you're hearing me clearly. Are you hearing me clearly?
Yes.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank the co-facilitator for bringing up a very nice issue that will move us further. My main concern is, well, I'm Dada from Nigeria, speaking on behalf of the advisor to the African group. My main concern is that we have been talking about issues of concern. And I've been hearing over and over to participants about talking about global issues. Issues of concern can not be restricted to only global issues. It can be regional, peculiar to one region or two regions. So we should bear that in mind. If we look at the documents, supporting documents we are using today, it was mentioned, when they mention about international issues, they also mention about regional issues. So there can be peculiarities of issues of concern specific to particular region or two regions. So we should bear that in mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Dada. Next, we move to Suki from Japan. I'm sorry, I know your hand dropped a couple of times. Please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the floor. And I would like to congratulate, as everybody said, the co-facilitator for producing this draft. It's a lot improved. Thank you very much. So we would like to make a comment for the initial part. Since process for the nominating issue is open to any stakeholder, we would like to make sure the limited resources and funds are allocated for scientifically demonstrated IOC. And the way to do it is, as UK proposed, maybe we can include the process within the nomination of issues or within the submission of information to make sure scientifically demonstrated adverse effect on human health and environment. Such information is included within the submission of information. Also, as for the establishing the review committee, depending on how many committee would be established, but it could add a lot of burden on the overall work. So we would still of the view that a leading agency should be designated for each IOC who has an expertise or strong interest in this field. And this allows better coordination among relevant stakeholders and their activities, as we have done so for the emerging policy issues in SciComm. I heard that the IOMC's comment that would add a lot of burden on IOMC. But a multi-stakeholder committee could be established when deemed necessary by the leading institution, but the establishment should not be a requirement. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Suki from Japan. I think, Thomas Sam, this concludes the list of people requesting the floor for the general document outline. I see that I think Thomas has dropped off the line for a moment, but I think this does conclude the outline section, and we can maybe get into more details as we walk through it, the proposal itself. Sam, do you want to pick up? I know Thomas was scheduled to do the title of the instrument. I know there's been some comments on it already. Would you be in a position to pick that up while Thomas reconnects? Sam, I think you're on mute as well.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I hear you now. And Alex, if you could just go to the next slide, please.
Yes. Yes, so thank you so much, and thanks for the comments that have been provided so far. I believe they are all in line with what we are doing so that we can enhance the document, towards discussion at IP4. So now we are talking about the title of the proposal, which, we have a bracketed text, issue of international in bracket and then concern. So before we move on, we have some rationale to talk about these items that we want to talk about. I mean, as we asked comments from participants, we had a group expressing, many people expressing different views on the title. And they are going in different directions. So we haven't actually proposed any new title, but we thought it wise to keep it the one from the compilation document IP4/2. And then we'd like to know that it could also be difficult to address an issue which is not actually of concern under this title. And we'd like to seek the stakeholders' views on whatever other issues than those concerns should be addressed. And if so, this could be done under this title. So if you can move on to, so yes, I open for discussion on this item. Blenda?
Yeah, no problem.
Yes.
And I think welcome back, Thomas. I see you here again.
Okay.
We're just Sam just opened up for you on the possible title. I see Matthias from representing the EU asking for the floor. Go ahead, Matthias.
Thank you very much, Brenda. Yeah, the EU and its member states are fine with the title. We would need further clarification which kind of issues are be missing by other stakeholders. And I think in general, as the process should be used only for addressing needs for concerted actions on chemicals and waste, for protecting health and environment, and for safeguarding the functioning of societies, that is appropriately reflected in the title as it is. For example, the things mentioned by Norway earlier on, we think that should fit also under that title and under the definition, at least in general. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthias.
So Blenda is
I see Alden. Thomas, are you back on to take over the chat? And Auden from Norway, I'll give you the floor. Thomas, do we hear you?
Do you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Fantastic. Okay. I was actually just going to say that several of the participants did speak to this issue earlier on, so you do not need to repeat those views. I mean, they have been duly noted by us, so no need to repeat.
Okay. Thank you, Thomas. And next, so I have Auden from Norway asking for the floor. So please go ahead, Auden. And maybe someone needs to mute their chat also yet, but Auden, go ahead.
Thank you. We expressed our view on the previous agenda point, so sorry for taking the floor again. Just want to specify that we think about the broader definition of the issues, just to have the opportunity to include also the things that may prevent the development of issues of concern, like, for example, issues under sustainable chemistry, for example, could be included also, and that would be before the concern is developed. For the concern to appear before we take action. Thanks.
Thank you, Auden. Next, we have Jacqueline Alvarez from UNEP. Please go ahead, Jacqueline.
Have not talked to yet. We would like to make maybe two comments. One is in the issue of what is an issue of concern, and following what Norway has just said, there are some things that the concern might start to be arising, and it's important to have that in mind. I would like to bring to the attention of the participants today the paper that was developed by UNEP per United Nations Environment Assembly request, that it's online. I will put the link right now. There is a whole chapter discussion discussing considerations for issues of concern, and that involves also the concept of international concern as well. So would like to bring that to your attention. If we don't have, and the question that it's posed there, issues that are not of concern under the titles, how we can manage that I think is the question to be open in here. And also the question of understanding the processes. It can go to a target or indicator thing as well as part of an issue. It doesn't need to be directly considered. But my main point was on the chapter 5 of this for the other point we would like to in a very quick manner make is that we think that we are at a stage that we need to see how the instrument is folding, because there are many requests of groups or multi-stakeholder things, and then we will be covered with a lot of elements and a lot of burden, not for organizations but for all the stakeholders. So I think it's wise to also start thinking that we might not be able to make a concrete proposal right now, but also see how things are unfolding. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I don't see other hands up for the moment. Oh, I see Sheila from ICCA. Please go ahead, Sheila.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Co-Facilitator. We just wanted to support the UK suggestion for the title of priority issues that warrant global action. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. I see Laura Nazef from the US. Please go ahead, Laura.
Well, thank you. We just think it's important to include a more positive approach here and to be able to use this to highlight advances and steps that can be taken for sustainability in chemicals production, use, or management, rather than just focusing on problems or potential problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. I see Audun from Norway asking for the floor. Go ahead, Audun.
Thank you very much. Just a quick comment on the last suggested title. We are a little bit reluctant to include the word global in the title, as it would be a question of how is global actually. So we would prefer international concern in that case. Thank you.
I don't see other hands.
Okay.
Okay, no other hands, I don't think, for the moment, Thomas and Sam.
Good. I'd like to thank the participants so far for very constructive views. And then I'll leave the floor to Sam to take over on the other issues.
Thank you so much, Thomas. So, friends, from the title, we'll move on to the definition. So, I think the next slide, please. Yeah, so we begin with the major issues of the titles as we show in our presentation on the proposal. So the first one is definition. And with the definition, we'd like to say that we have considered the discussions and the feedback we had, and that the definition that was actually used in the ICCM resolution 2.4 is proposed as is already as an agreed text. It's simpler and also viewed as more inclusive. So we did not change anything in definition. We believe that it is appropriate for the work that we are talking about, issues of concern. And then issue about life cycle, actually, I mean, talking about the concept of waste also is inherent because life cycle chemicals also include the waste aspect. So we believe that the definition as it is now is, is an agreed text, simpler and also more inclusive. So I'd like to have your comments on that one. So Brenda, can we have some interaction on that one?
Yes. So I see Zuki from South Africa asking for the floor. So let's start with Zuki. Please go ahead, Zuki.
Thanks, Brenda, and thanks, Sam, for the presentation. I'd like to remind us that UNEP indicated that they're doing some work on this, and we're not certain what would be the outcome of that, but also indicate that we have, as the African region, reiterated throughout that the issues of concern that were raised and accepted before, and nothing was done on them, need to be carried forth, because currently we have those that have not yet been recognized, those that have been partially or insufficiently addressed, of which then it leaves out, this definition leaves out those that were nominated but were not addressed. So there's that part that is missing in this definition. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Suki. I see some comments in the chat and would encourage people to put their hand up and to relay their comments. Okay, please go ahead, Matthias from the European Union, representing the European Union. Go ahead, Matthias.
Thanks, Brenda. Yeah, the EU and its member states welcome the return to the current definition in principle, because we find it's the much better basis for the further discussion. However, we see a need for modifications to better align the definition with the 2030 agenda in order to fulfill the mandate of the intersessional process and for ICCM 5. The first thing is that we are of the opinion that waste should be mentioned in order to avoid any gaps. And the second point in this regard is that we are of the opinion that significance should be deleted in order to not lowering the ambition in comparison to SDG 12, in particular target 12.4. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthias. Now I have Michel Sheeran from Switzerland. Go ahead, Michel.
Thank you very much. I would like to support the intervention made by the EU just now, as I was also going to underline the links that we are making with future frameworks to the Sustainable Development Goals, and that the goal 12.4 on managing sound management of chemicals and waste references all waste, and that we should not limit ourselves when with a more narrow wording when establishing the post-2020 framework for the sound management of chemicals and waste. And so yes, support to this previous intervention. We also think that waste should be mentioned there in the definition. Thank you.
Thank you, Michel. I think I've seen Gilbert Kwepu asking for the floor in the chat. Please unmute Gilbert if you can, Alex. And in the meantime, I'll give the floor to Silvani Gianni, who's asking for the floor and hand up. So Silvani, please, you have the floor. followed by Gilbert. I think he's asking for the floor. Can you unmute Silvani? Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Brenda. I'm speaking on behalf of IPEN, and IPEN welcomes the proposed text on the division of the issues of concern by the facilitators from discussions and submissions from stakeholders. However, based on the different interpretation of the word significant seen in the past when new data were presented to support decision making, we are suggesting to use the EU definition in its 2013 report entitled Interpretations of the WSD 2020 Chemicals Goal and Assessment of the EU Effort to meet the WSD commitment for the common understanding and communication. So it is significant that harm is something more than detectable, but it needs to be at the level of serious or substantial. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I assume, Gilbert, that Silvani captured your response as part of IPEN. Maybe you could signal in the chat because I'm not hearing you come up. Next, I have Sheila from ICCA. Please go ahead, Sheila.
Yes, thank you. We would like to actually keep significant as it can be scientifically based and would also help with the prioritization process and aspect that we mentioned earlier when resources are limited. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. I have Allison Kennedy from Canada, followed by Laura Nazef, USA. Go ahead, Allison.
Thank you, Brenda. We think the definition that's proposed is still quite long. It is better than where we were, but it's still very long and it could be shorter. And what's proposed in the document, it's essentially the original definition from ICCM Resolution 2.4, which was for emerging policy issues. Whereas we're considering the definition for issues of concern for the new framework. So we think this wording might now inadvertently omit issues that could be considered in the new framework. The submission of information section that we'll be talking about next sets out what kinds of issues should be proposed for consideration. So we don't really see the benefit of including similar descriptors in this long, it's a bit of long of a definition. And so we'd suggest a simpler definition, something like an issue of concern can be any issue within the scope of the Beyond 2020 instrument. That gets us away from a debate about like redebating the scope here. In this definition section, we're talking about scope for the whole instrument anyways. And then the second part of it, it can be something like that is not being addressed in another forum and for which the Beyond 2020 framework is best placed to make progress, or that would not be better addressed by another fora, something to that effect. And that's what we offer for your consideration.
Thank you, Allison. Next, we have Laura Nazef from the USA, followed by Auden from Norway. Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you. We think it is good to have a simpler definition and would welcome further discussions of that. For the time being, although the definition we have here is an improvement shorter than the one we had before, just to reflect our view of including other types of issues, we would suggest some language to be added about an issue that could help accelerate investment in and the uptake of innovative and sustainable solutions across the life cycle of chemicals, or something to that effect, just to recognize the issues of interest or issues that are of a more solution-oriented and positive nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. The next and last speaker I have on the list is Auden from Norway. Go ahead, Auden.
Thank you. We agree with the previous speakers, and we think that this is a good definition as a starting point for further discussions, and we are open to proposals for simplifications of the text. We see the most important part of the definition to be the last part, actually, and the adverse effects. And we would propose to move this as the first point and then follow up with that the issue is not, has not yet been generally recognized and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Next, we have Matus from Brazil. Please go ahead, Matus.
Thank you very much. We also think that the co-facilitator's proposal is a good starting point for discussions and should be further simplified. But we would also like to support the concerns regarding the words which has not yet been generally recognized, since we believe it is vague enough not to address important issues that need to be considered, as stated by the colleague from South Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matus. Next, I see Zuki from South Africa. Please go ahead, Zuki.
Thank you, Brenda. There's something like to support, for example, the issue that we need to reflect and include waste on the definition. The reason being, we've always been talking about life cycle, but for whatever reason, missed the waste component of the life cycle management. So to ensure that we are not missing that, and also in line with the SDGs we're proposing as the African region, the specific inclusion, or to be explicit and include the waste on the definition. Thank you.
Thank you, Zuki. Next, we have Sayed Mahdi from, I'm not sure where you're from, but please go ahead, Sayed, maybe clarify where you're from.
Thank you, Brenda. I am from Iran.
Okay, great.
Thank you. I think any definition on issues of concern must be in accordance with the scope of ICANN Beyond 2020 framework. Also, there are some questions from me. For example, how do we want to measure that an issue is sufficiently or insufficiently addressed? You know, it is, everyone can have has its own interpretation. The other issue is that regarding the scientific information, I think it needs an adjective that, for example, to have reliable scientific information, which has some scientific certainty in it. Also, in the definition, I think it is important to include waste after chemicals, also to have issues of international concern, not issues of concern. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Iran. I don't see anyone else asking for the floor.
So should we move on then?
Yes, over to you, Sam.
Yeah, thank you, Brenda. So I would like to thank participants for their good comments, and we have taken note of all the comments that they have provided, and we will take them into consideration. So we move on to the next item. Slide, please, on the submission of information. So here, if I may give some rationale behind, our work as co-facilitator, I believe that for the information that we had and the previous discussions, we had general support for the information requirements set out in Annex B, the compilation documents, and the text proposal also follows Annex B. We have made some attempts to actually simplify the text and identify the possibilities for compromise, as our mandate suggests, or trying to check in areas of divergence as well. So, and the title of this subsection, actually, submission information, has been revised to align more with the title for the ICCM Resolution 2.4, and that the information should be included in submission and not necessarily viewed as information requirements. And also, I think the criteria has been mentioned already by my colleague Thomas, that during our discussion, I mean, it was viewed of being duplicated to the text. So, I mean, they are all to be captured under the requirements, information requirements. And therefore, that aspect has been removed from our proposal. So, if we move to the next slide, where we have the formation on the submission. I think there are 8 items there. So we are saying that to nominate an issue, these are the criteria, these are the information that should be provided. One, on adverse effects on human health or the environment, take into account Italia, women, children, and other vulnerable populations, biodiversity ecosystems, and toxicological and exposure data. Also, how the issues are integral to the vision of the Beyond 2020 framework, which is ongoing, and they need to be addressed to enhance basic chemicals and waste management. Again, the extent to which action is needed on the issue in order for countries to meet the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 should be considered. Also, the extent to which the issues are being addressed by other bodies at the regional or international levels, and how proposed action is related to the or complements or does not duplicate such efforts. Also, the extent to which the problem is relevant, particularly taking into account the needs of developing countries or countries with economies in transition. Also, the extent to which the issues of the issue is cross-cutting in nature, including the sectoral and the sectoral level, and also the existing knowledge and perceived gaps in understanding the issues. And finally, the list of priority actions and related timelines to guide the implementation and the elaboration of a proposed work plan. So I would like to find out from participants if the list as we have here on information is comprehensive enough for our purpose, and also are there, or is there anything that you can support, or you cannot support, sorry, you cannot support in the text, the list that we have given, and also if there's anything that is missing in the list, we welcome you to make submission. So Brenda, we enter the discussion, so if you can find people ready, they can. Yeah.
Happy to.
Okay.
No hands up, so that's always a good sign. Oh, okay, Matthias.
Too early enough, yeah.
Thanks. I didn't want to be the first again. Anyway, the EU and member states support the content of that chapter in general, but we think with regard to the details of the text, it would benefit from further discussions. And in addition, we should bear in mind that the name of the instrument has to be updated once there is agreement reached on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthias. Next, we have Suki from Japan. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much. So in addition to adding the scientifically demonstrated at the paragraph A in the beginning, we would also like to add potential lead agency and also potential target and indicator along with proposed work plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Suki. Next, Jacqueline from UNEP.
Yes, thank you very much. And one of the aspects here is that we understand it's important to spell out what any submission of information might be needed. We have a concern that also goes to the definition and then to the submission of this information. Of course, if we need to highlight adverse effects on humans and in the environment, but that's not usually the case. So, and we are also thinking, for example, as issues of concern, issues related, for example, to recycling in general, or to agendas that like green and sustainable chemistry, for example. They could be part of an issue of concern or an international issue that warrant action somehow. And if we are putting a very detailed submission of information proposal, it might not meet any of that criteria, but the new instrument can serve as the platform for further understanding and discussing those areas. So having said that, we can live in a way with this proposal under B, but for us it's better if it is more streamlined. And the other element is where this process needs to go. Is it part of the instrument, or should it go to a resolution indicating how submission of information might be needed? That's the other big question with this part, where to place this the whole issues of concern, bringing that maybe things are evolving very, very quickly. There might be other aspects as well. So just some food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Next is Laura from USA, followed by Lillian Cora. Please go ahead, Laura.
Thank you. We generally support the inclusion of these elements, although, as others have noted, we would see the need for some detailed discussions. We would have some detailed edits to propose. Thank you.
Okay, please go ahead, Lillian.
Yes, only to highlight that from the aspects of health and from the aspects of vulnerable population, we have to be very careful in the wording and have the idea of being comprehensive when it is an emerging issue, when it is a new issue or an issue of concern. We have from the health area, sometimes we have scientific evidence, and but we don't have health evidence. So we have to be very careful because and to pay attention to the alerts. So we have to keep our minds open and be comprehensive in the discussion of these issues, and take care of including all the aspects along the full change of management and production and disposal of chemicals. Thank you.
Thank you, Lillian. Okay, I see Zuki from South Africa, and I don't have any other hands up. So please go ahead, Zuki.
Thank you, Brenda. What we would like to indicate is the African region on this agenda item is that, for example, we've got a concern on element G where we say perceived gaps, because they are real gaps. So we would rather have that just saying gaps, whether they are perceived or real, that could be established at that particular time. Because experience from those affected is different from those that might have had this and that about the issue of concern at hand. Also, D, where it says the extent to which the issue is being addressed, we feel that that is one-sided, is not taking, for example, into consideration the report by UNEP that indicates that even though there was a sort of, in inverted brackets, a buy-in or a promise to address some issues of concerns that were already nominated, it never became a reality. So those are the issues that we're having, because there could be an oral commitment to say we would attend to this, but due to whatever reasons, we have seen that in some instances that is not necessarily going to result into the honoring of that commitment. Also, we're concerned about, we're not seeing the issue of synergistic effects, because you get cases whereby an individual compound or chemical alone may not necessarily be more toxic or cause more damage to the environment and human health than when it's acting synergistically with the others. Also, the other issue we're concerned about, since we are working towards safe and environment, because we would be utilizing safe chemicals, we're not seeing the issue of sustainable chemistry being incorporated here. So we should not necessarily wait until a particular country then indicates that I'm having a problem with this. We need to also be affording sustainable chemistry to address the problems that we find ourselves being faced with. Thank you.
Thank you, Zuki. Next we have Sheila from ICCA, followed by Gabby from UNIDO. Please go ahead, Sheila.
Thank you. We'd like some other speakers. We would also like to see the inclusion of based on reliable science, for example, in B1, but also to other aspects that have been added or mentioned. For example, if it's sustainable, again, it could also be part of that, be science-based. We support Japan's commands to link this to the targets and indicators. And on E, we would like to add the extent to which the problem is relevant internationally. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Next, we have Gabby Engelman from UNIDO. Go ahead, Gabby.
Yeah, thank you, and welcome to everyone. I can be brief. I would also we would support the intervention made by Japan on point B, that we would welcome to see that how this issue not only contributes to reach the vision, but also strategic objective, and how it's linked to the targets and indicators. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Gabby. We then have Carolyn Vickers from WHO. Please go ahead, Carolyn.
Yes, thank you very much. In point 1, it says adverse effects on human health and or the environment. It makes people perhaps think that we're thinking about individual chemicals, but the definition should be broad enough to take up issues that may not be an individual chemical or a group of chemicals. It might be a particular type of action that the international organizations need to take. So we would propose, instead of effects, to use the word impacts. And this may also be relevant for consideration in the definition, should that terminology stay there. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. I don't see anyone else asking for the floor.
Okay, so on that note, I'd like to thank all the contributions and comments made so far, and then just to say that we have taken note of them, and then we will talk about them later on. Looking at our time, I think we are moving on, and we don't have much time. So I would suggest that we move to the next item, that's on the C. Next slide, please. And we have 3 items there: nomination of issues, initial review and publication submissions, and decision making and adoption. So what I'll do is that I'll provide a rationale for all the 3 small items there, and then I open the floor for discussion. So the first one on the nomination of issues. From our previous discussions, there was general support for nomination procedure set out in Annex B of the compilation document, and some attempts have therefore been made to simplify the text and identify the possibilities for compromise or alternative text as per our mandate. Also, the issues of concern will arise and evolve over time, as we know, and that nominations will be allowed at any point. We are proposing a 6-month deadline to submit nominations for consideration to the conference. On the initial review and publication of submissions. We have the following rationale that we have noted the submissions that there is some additional need to include a rule for the initial review and publication of the examination, as was the case in Resolution 2.4. And also, this text has been extracted from the agreed text in ICCM Resolution 2.4, and some attempts have been made to simplify the text and update it to align with the Annex B. And regarding the decision-making and adoption, here, as we have mentioned earlier on, a multi-stakeholder committee or committees are proposed to guide efforts and implementation of the individual issues of concern. So if a decision is taken at a future conference to continue the work of the existing emerging policy issues or issues of concern, and as I can, it's proposed that efforts on these issues will be guided by the process as set out in the session. And also the proposed text within the main body of the future instrument discussed in the governance group should be reviewed in consideration of the virtual working group 3 discussion, that is section 4 of Part E, and also subsidiary and other committee bodies. So on that, I think you can show the slide on the first one on nomination issues, so that people will look at it, take a look at it. So can you take the go to the next slide, please? Yes. So here we have basically 3 items there on nomination issues. That the process of nominating issues is open by to any stakeholder, and that the nomination procedure will be made available on the strategic approach website, and that to promote communication about the nominations should be communicated to all focal points, and also regions may wish to add to a subject of relevance, at any regional meeting that you have, and also nominations must be submitted 6 months prior to the meeting of conference. Can you move on to the issue, the next one on the initial review and publication of submissions? Yes, the next one, next slide, please. Next slide. Yes, so here, after the first one, we think that the Secretariat will check the nominations for completeness with the aim of assisting proponents in completing their nominations. The proponents may be contacted to provide any missing information. And then from there, the Secretariat will compile a list of nominations, which are annotated with any summary of information from submissions. Similar nominations will be clustered so that similar issues can be considered together as appropriate and relevant. The comments received from stakeholders on the nominations will be made publicly available by Secretariat. The proponents of any issue will have an opportunity to revise the nominations to take into account comments or to clarify information provided, and to work with other proponents to consolidate nominations that may be similar or complementary. And the Secretariat will consolidate a final list of nominations annotated with a summary of information. Can we move on to the decision-making and adoption aspect? That is next 2 slides, please. Next slide, please. Yes, so here the issues should be selected and adopted by a resolution of the conference. In adopting the issue, the conference should first of all, agree to a list of priority actions and the related timelines, and also establish a multi-stakeholder committee to guide efforts and implementation of the issue. And that multi-stakeholder committee will undertake the following tasks. 1, develop and implement a work plan, including proposed indicated for relevant targets and the different objectives of the future framework, and also coordinate with other relevant bodies such as the IOMC, organizations, and others. Example, the Convention Secretariat, and then also monitor and evaluate the progress against indicators and make recommendations to the conference as appropriate. So these are the issues that we have proposed. So I would like to open the floor for comments on all three. We are putting them together. Yes. So, Brenda, if there are any comments, you can start now.
Sure. First hand up, I think, is Zuki from South Africa. Please go ahead, Zuki.
Thank you, Sam, for that presentation. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Sam, for the presentation. I'd like to reiterate what we said before, for example, in terms of the nomination. We said nominations should not be endorsed by government, whereby whichever stakeholder has nominated has to then submit to the focal point. The reason being, it takes away independence. What if then the government is bought, so to speak? We said we're all equal stakeholders under SAICM, and that should be respected in the nomination process. And would like to reiterate that we still wish that each and every stakeholder of SAICM should be able to nominate. Secondly, in the process of nomination, we indicated that independence is critical. The reason being, we've seen previously whereby countries that are not having should I say, financial sustainability on their own were bullied by bigger powers. And we want a country to be protected. Hence, then, instead of a party nominating and submitting straight secretariat getting additional influence, there needs to be an independent scientific committee that would then recommend to ICCM for adoption. But the recommendation or the assessment of the nominations should be done by scientists and independent body, supported administratively by the Secretariat. And then also there's linkages like we indicated before. What we said, yes, we need prioritization, but we need to ensure that there's sufficient resources to ensure that we don't find ourselves where we're at, whereby some nominated issues are not addressed simply because of a lack of resources, and yet they were agreed to be nominated. I think I will end there for now. Thanks, Brenda.
Thank you, Zuki. Next, Auden from Norway.
Yes, thank you very much. On the part on initial review and publication of submissions, we would propose to change from submissions to nominations in the title. And on in point 2 below, there is a sentence saying that comments received from stakeholders on the nominations will be made publicly available by the Secretariat. But there is no procedure asking for comments. So this is probably a good idea. So we would suggest that such a procedure is added somewhere above. And on point 3, this is decision making and adoption. Point 2, there is a reference to proposing targets and indicators for the different issues. And we think that the formulation here preempts the discussions in Virtual Working Group 1 on targets and indicators a bit, as the discussions in that group had 2 main pathways, and this is one of them. So we should maybe put it in brackets or add a reference to this group and their conclusion. The other alternative was to have targets and indicators incorporated by reference rather than adding them in the formal set of targets and indicators. Thank you.
Thank you, Auden. Next, I have Laura from USA. Laura?
Thank you. Our main points are on item 3, decision making and adoption. Just point B under number 1. It might be more practical for the conference to call for the establishment of the committees instead of establishing them. I think currently the practice is that the Secretariat works to set up steering groups, so maybe rethinking this. And then under item 2, we agree with Norway that that the indicators are being developed via a separate process, and we think that the linkage to the outcome of the Virtual Working Group 1 should be noted in the rationale. And then under C, we think the conference should evaluate the progress on indicators similar to the evaluation of the other reporting. So we would just propose to take out and evaluate. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Next, we have Matthias representing EU and member states, followed by Allison Kennedy, Canada. Go ahead, Matthias.
Thanks, Brenda. Again, the EU and member states support the content of that section in general, but thinks that further discussion is needed with regard to the details of the text. Let me mention just two main issues in our view. The first one is we like to see an explicit reference to the precautionary principle, as it is done in the Stockholm Convention, for example, and could come up with a concrete proposal for text when the time is there. And the second issue where we think further discussion is needed are the multi-stakeholder committees. A lot of other participants already raised their concerns. We think that we carefully have to think about the structure, the tasks, and also the implications of such group or groups, and have to seriously consider what was mentioned, for example, by South Africa or by the IMC organization, and find a way how to deal with that and how to most effectively address actions with regard to issues of concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthias. Allison Kennedy from Canada, followed by Syed Mahdi from Iran, followed by Gabby from UNIDO. Allison, go ahead.
Thanks for giving me the floor. Regarding the nomination, selection, and adoption process, we think the main issues are here, but what still needs to be given further consideration and developed is the process and the timelines by which these steps are going to need to happen. So some of the elements that need to be considered, one is the timelines within the process, including the length of time that's provided for consideration of the proposals. So the text here is proposing 6 months. We're wondering if that's going to be sufficient time to look at proposals and perhaps they be comments considered and adapted further. For reference, it was previously 18 months that the proposals were looked at. So now we're down to 6 months. Next, who considers the proposal and prioritizes them? And what is the role of the regions and the open-ended working group, for example? Both of them had a role in the previous process that was in Resolution 2.4. Also, process and timelines for how does the International Conference assess the merits of the proposals when the nominations are in, and at what point does the full work plan, beyond just the priority actions, a work plan that includes targets and indicators, when does that get developed and adopted by the conference, and when does the actual implementation begin? So those are items that remain to be set out clearly, but that impact some of the timelines and the steps that are described here. So that's going to need a little more thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. I'm just noting it's getting close to 4 o'clock and our meeting is scheduled only till 4. Sam, Thomas, do you have any comments on how you'd wish to proceed in terms of the time?
Okay, thank you, Brenda. Since we are not yet finished our agenda, I would like to beg of the participants to allow for 30 minutes so we can conclude our work. That's my humble plea. Please bear with us 30 more minutes.
Thanks, Sam. Okay, so we'll continue on for 30 more minutes. Okay, so next I have Saeed from Iran. Please go ahead, followed by Gabby Unido.
Thank you, Brenda. With regards to the nomination process, I think in terms of who is eligible to nominate an issue as an issue of concern, I think it is subject to the final agreement on the nature of SciCam beyond 2020. Because we are not yet, it's not yet certain that what would be the nature of SciCam beyond 2020. So the second point is that I think 6 months is too short, especially if we want to receive the comment and submission from parties. So it should be at least 6 months, I think. Also on the part 3, decision and adaptation and adoption, I see the proposed text by co-facilitators. It's lacking to have an adaptation gap dimension and finance, technology, capacity building, knowledge, and so on. So I think under paragraph 2 in part 3, decision making and adoption, it is important to include in the work plan, especially when it comes to monitor and evaluate the progress against while we monitor and evaluate the progress. It is important to have the required conditions, because it is of course it is important to identify and nominate an issue of concern, but I'm sure you agree with me that challenges starts especially for the countries, the developing countries, the challenges start in the implementation phase. So I think the adaptation gap dimension on finance, technology, capacity is necessary to be included in any work plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Gabby from UNIDO, followed by Gilbert from IPEN asking for the floor from the chat. Gabby, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Brenda. I would just share some reflections we had among us, some IOMC members, when we were looking at this proposal, in particular on the point 3I, decision-making adoption. We just wonder, and we might need some more information, how this multi-stakeholder committee would implement the issue. We understand they could guide the efforts, but how could the committee implement? And would then only the members of this committee implement the work plan that is set out for the implementation? And would this not separate the issues of concern from the overall vision, from the strategic objective of the future instrument? And this point came out also as, I think, in the evaluation that the previous or the existing emerging policy issues were not fully linked with the entire instrument. So we just had some reflection, and we need some more information how that in practice would take place and why this was proposed. And then also just on one point on the decision-making adoption, I think it's there we have the reference to the existing emerging policy issues, and I just would link it a little bit to the proposal we submitted, some IMC members, where we think it's needed to have a decision to continue these emerging policy issues, not to disrupt and stop any work, and then also really once the decision and then measure the progress under these existing issues. And once the decision is taken, maybe at the we proposed once a decision is taken that issues would continue, existing emerging policy would continue, that would be treated the same. And I think that we as new issues, and I think that we very much welcome in this proposal. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Gabby. Next we have Gilbert Kouabou from IPEN. Gilbert, are you unmuted?
Thank you, Brenda. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, yes.
Yes, on point 1, Roman 1, on nomination of issue, we have comment on para 3. And then on that para, I would like to insert the word at least 6 months prior to the ICCM. This is because in order to allow many submissions as possible before the ICCM, not just to give a signal that there is only one opportunity for nomination of an issue. On second point, on decision-making, adoption, para 1A, IPEN is in the view that the ICCM should agree on target and indicator as well, not only on priority action. On para 1B, we are also on the view that the multi-stakeholder committees to be established should be an ad hoc subcommittee in order to indicate that it is not a it is just to indicate that it is a time limit committee and purpose focused committee, because this clarification is important. On point 2, I believe that too much power is assigned to a small number of stakeholders. That should be much more limited. Para 2A, IPEN suggests that the following revision. You can read, develop and implement a work plan based on the priority action, target, and indicator agreed by the conference. We add the target and indicator as well. On paragraph 2B, we should read, coordinate with other relevant other relevant bodies such as the IOMC organization and others, and then with the support of the SICAM Secretariat. Para 2D, IPEN suggests that if the subcommittee are agreed to, they should not make recommendation, but report to the ICCM and the OEWG, assuming it will continue under the new instrument. Recommendation to ICCM should not be made by a small group of stakeholders with limited participation, but only by OEWG. Thanks, Brenda, for hearing me, and thanks for other colleagues for their attention.
Thank you, Gilbert. Next, we have Olga Sporinskaya, followed by Suki from Japan, followed by Matus from Brazil, and Zuki from South Africa. Go ahead, Olga.
Yeah, so thank you very much. We first of all would like to say that we believe that the multi-stakeholder committee should be in a position to set up a time-bound groups for each of the current emerging policy issues and other issues of concern, and the newly nominated ones. And we agree with IPEN that that the nominations should be submitted. The work plans should be submitted at least 6 months prior to the following sessions of ICCM, as it is actually suggested in option 2 for the process to determine next steps for existing EPIs and new issues of concern. And we also think that the committee, the multi-stakeholder committee, and the ad hoc working groups are not in a position to implement the work plan. They are in a position to facilitate the implementation, coordinate the work, communicate with stakeholders, identify gaps, challenges as they occur, and such things. Yes, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Olga. Zuki, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. As for the nomination, the proposal shows we have 6 months to nominate before the international conference. Then some sort of scientific assessment should be incorporated before the nomination, or if it's during the nomination process, then we will need a longer period than 6 months. As for decision-making and adoption, the committee is supposed to develop indicators for the relevant targets and the different strategic objectives. But the strategic objective can focus on the overall post-2020 instruments, and we think that it's easier to manage and more effective to track progress when each IOC have comprehensive targets and indicators within each IOC. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Suki. Just before I pass to Matheus from Brazil, we are getting short of time. There will be an opportunity for written submissions following this, so just please be quick in your interventions in the interest of us being able to finish at 4:30. And we have captured notes, so there's no need to repeat things that have already been said, but it's very important we get through this discussion, so please be quick in your interventions. Over to you, Matheus from Brazil.
Thank you very much. So as for topic on nomination of issues, we agree that nominations should be submitted at least 6 months prior to the conference, as was previously stated. But our comments would be more on the decision-making and adoption. We would like to kindly ask the co-facilitators for clarification on the nature of this multi-stakeholder committee, in as much as the proposed text does not clearly indicate whether it's going to be a subsidiary, open-ended, or a group of specialists. In addition, we think it is important to adjust the wording of topic B, since we believe, as others have previously stated, that the prerogative related to the implementation should be from the stakeholders and not the committee. So instead of reading guide efforts and implementation on the issue, we think it would be better if it was written as to guide efforts for the implementation on the issue. And this reasoning also applies to item 2A. So we would like to kindly suggest the deletion of the terms "and implement" in that item. And finally, from our perspective, the language of topic 2A would also be improved if we added right after the term "work plan" the words "considering a list of priority actions and related timelines adopted by the conference," in as much as these work plans should be coherent to the guidelines of the ICCM. So the topic would read, "develop a work plan considering the list of priority actions and related timelines adopted by the conference," and so on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matheus. I see I missed Syed from Iran. I'm sorry about that. So you're next on the queue with your hand up, Syed, followed by Zuki from South Africa.
Sorry, I didn't ask for the floor.
Oh, okay, no problem. So next is Zuki from South Africa.
Thank you, Brenda, for affording us as the African region another opportunity, and sorry for taking the floor again. Would like to suggest that would like to say that the committee is not in a position to implement the work plan, and we're suggesting that the IONC organizations be the ones that would be supporting the affected countries in terms of implementation, as it was confirmed during a physical targets meeting in Switzerland that there are the IONC organization, particularly the UN ones, are responsible for implementation of each and every SDG. Thank you.
Thank you, Zuki. Michelle Shear in Switzerland, followed by Sheila from ICCA, and then we'll close the speakers list unless other hands go up. Please go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you. I would like to say that we welcome these elements and we thank the co-chairs for proposing those. We think this is very useful. We have one comment with regard to the Multi-Stakeholder Committee and what it will do. We think those tasks to have, in particular, then also a monitoring, evaluation, and recommendation for the conference will also be should be conducted also for existing SAICM issues, as this will be very helpful to base the discussions on for considering if the work on existing SAICM issues should be continued, scaled up, or discontinued, or what options there should be. So this this work of this committee in terms of evaluating and making recommendations will be crucial for that discussion. And in terms of timing, therefore, if ICCM 5 can establish committees, then such evaluation recommendations would be ready for the following conference to base that discussion on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. I think Sheila from ICCEA had asked for the floor, but maybe your hand is down. Just giving Sheila a moment. Okay. I think that closes our speakers list for, oh, Sheila's asking for the floor. So go ahead, Sheila, thanks.
So, sorry about this. Thank you. Just very briefly on 3.1, as mentioned earlier, we really think that there should be an opportunity for prioritization of issues in the recommendation process before the ICCM makes a decision on adopting the issues. So we don't adopt issues where we don't have the resources to address them properly. So somewhere in this process, this is still missing for us. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sheila. I don't see any other hands up on section C, Sam.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. We are actually in need of time again. So quickly, let me introduce the item agenda for D, mechanism for implementation. We have 3 issues there: work plans, tracking progress, determine the need for further work on issue. And we'll also take them together as we did for the C. So I will only provide the rationale and then open the floor for comments. So for the work plan, we saw the need for a work plan for concrete and time-bound implementation was highlighted in the discussion we had during the previous meeting, and it's reflected in this our proposal and for consideration. And also concerning the tracking progress and determining the need for further work on the issue, we think that this text is drawn from Annex B, and some attempt has been made to simplify the text and identify possibility for compromise or alternative text in areas of divergence as per our mandate. So I think colleagues have the document ready, so I will not mention all the items under work plans, tracking progress, and determine the needs. So I'll open the floor for comments. Brenda, over to you.
Thank you, Sam. So yeah, the floor is open on section D, mechanisms for implementation. And just be reminded that if you've already made your intervention, we've recorded it. Okay, please go ahead, Matthias from the EU.
Yeah, try to be brief. Oh, thanks, Brenda. Yeah, try to be brief. And want to mention just that the overarching role of the ICCM, or however the name will be of the future conference, should be mentioned somewhere. We missed that. And I already raised the need for further discussion with regard to the multi-stakeholder committees or other relevant bodies. Thank you.
Thank you. Auden from Norway, followed by Laura, USA. Go ahead, Auden.
Yes, thank you very much. On point 2, tracking of progress, we think that the points A and B are a little bit unclear. It's unclear what the difference between these 2 points are, and we may propose some simplifications in writing later on. On the next point, determining the need for further work on an issue, we propose to switch the order of these 2 points. Point 1, the conference may decide to conclude work on a particular issue, is actually one of the conclusions that may be made under the considerations done in point 2, so the order should be switched. And likewise, in point 2, there is a sentence saying that the evaluation will be provided by the No, sorry, wrong point. So thanks then.
Thanks, Auden, for shortening further. Excellent. Laura from USA, you have the floor, followed by Allison, Canada.
Thank you. Just under work plans, item 2, we think this should read: the Secretariat, in consultation with the Multi-Stakeholder Committee, should invite all relevant stakeholders to implement the work plan. Under 2, tracking progress, we would note that coordinating reporting is a Secretariat function. So we think that we should say that the Secretariat, in consultation with the committee, will coordinate monitoring and reporting as described in section G of the instrument. And then we have other edits as well that we would propose. Thank you.
Hey, Mom. Thank you, Laura. Next, we have Allison Kennedy from Canada, followed by Carolyn Vickers.
Thanks, Brenda. I'll keep this very brief. Regarding the points about tracking progress, reporting progress, progress and issues of concern, we think should be part of the progress reporting on the instrument itself. So through the targets and indicators framework. So our preference is that the targets and indicators would be adopted by the conference and then included by reference in strategic objective C. Thanks.
Thank you, Allison. Carolyn Vickers, followed by Gabby Engemann. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Thank you very much. In relation to the multi-stakeholder committees, their role in tracking progress, we're wondering if this would apply to the existing EPIs if they're carried forward. For example, would it mean that the Global Alliance on Eliminating Lead in Paint would be dismantled and replaced by such a committee? These are many of the questions we have as to how this would work in practice in future. And also, we're quite interested in the comment that Canada made earlier about the role of the regions and the open-ended working group. So I think it would be nice to take a couple of examples through this process, a new issue and one of the existing issues, and just test it at each step and see what it would mean in practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Next, we have Gabby from UNIDO, followed by Gilbert from IPEN. Go ahead, Gabby.
Yeah, thanks. As already said, we coordinated also on this issue among some IMC members, and we just wonder if this the mechanism for implementation, if we really have a one-size-fits-all, because previously we worked on different emerging issues and we had different approaches. No? So, is it really this approach outlined in this mechanism for implementation that we think for all future issues of concern will be the best one, will allow us to really effective and efficiently implement this issue of concern? We are not sure. We think we should be quite flexible on this and maybe not enshrine this mechanism for implementation in the instrument. Maybe it would be better to have resolutions and see which is the best one for all issues that come up. I think that's the main point I wanted to make. Yes. Thank you. Oh no, we also discussed on the role of the secretary. It's not only on the role, but do we not, I mean, not to overburden the secretariat with a lot of work. We see here now that comes on it, especially on the evaluation, if there is need for further work. Do we, at the moment, do we already know if that could be done by the secretariat? We are not sure. We should also be sure that the capacity and all the resources are available to do that work. And then a final point, when it comes for implementation on the work plans, I think we have also experienced under the existing emerging policy issues that not all really received support from the funds that were available especially from the CHEF. So I think that needs to be ensured that if we identify new issues, that they're also treated in the same manner when it comes to access to financial resources. Thank you. Now I'm closing, sorry.
No problem, Gabby, thank you. Next speaker is Gilbert from IPEN, and if I see no other hands, we'll close the floor. Gilbert, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Brenda. To be short, in para 3.1, IPEN found that the word conclude is ambiguous in this context and need clarification for common understanding and communication. And a general comment on this is that we believe that adoption or nomination should be uncoupled from maybe having means of implementation, because the sake of this exercise is maybe allowing discussion or raising issue that can be take over at the level of the country or other with maybe some domestic means. So we should not hide or limit the issue of concern on the sake that we don't have means to implement them. It is of the sake of communication and sensitization. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Gilbert. As far as I can see, Sam, that covers the speakers list on this item. So back to you, Sam.
Yes, thank you so much, Brenda. So quickly, I'll pass on to my colleague for him to take up the item 5, and then perhaps we end. We will close very soon by the stipulated time. So Thomas, please.
Thank you very much, Sam. Just very briefly then on item 5. Which is linkage to the next steps for the existing emerging policy issues and other issues of concern. So if we could have the next slide, please. The next slide. It's item 5 on the top. Item 5 on the top. Yeah, there we are. Okay, so you'll remember that we discussed this on the 14th of December on what to do with the existing emerging policy issues. We have received written submissions by the 21st of December from a number of stakeholders. And obviously, I mean, some of you have already spoken to this issue already today. Now, if I could go to the next slide. I mean, you see these only today, but luckily you will have a few days to revise this text or review this text, and then come back to us with your written submissions. But basically, what Sam and I propose is that at ICCM 5. The meeting will agree to an omnibus resolution on the existing SAICM EPIs and other issues of concern. That simply recognise the efforts and progress made so far, welcomes the assessment report on the issues of concern made by UNEP following Resolution UNEP 4/8, states the intention to determine and set the path forward on the existing SAICM EPIs and other issues of concern into the Beyond 2020 instrument. At the next session of the ICCM, or whatever it's then called, and highlights any immediate and specific priority actions to ensure that efforts and momentum continue where appropriate. That was important to many of you, that we don't lose momentum between ICCM 5 and 6, and then request the responsible IOMC organisations, in consultation with stakeholders, to propose a draft work plan with clear timelines and milestones to ICCM 6, including an assessment on how they contribute to achieving the strategic objectives and targets of the Beyond 2020 instrument, and be proposing additional indicators as needed for relevant targets. And then from ICCM 6, or whatever it's called, and onwards, the conference will then note that any existing EPIs and other issues of concern that continue under the new instrument would follow procedures that are established for the issues of international concern, or whatever they're called, under the Beyond 2020 instrument. Many of you will recognise, I think, this from some of the submissions made, so there shouldn't be any big surprises. There was considerable, I would say, considerable consensus on how to proceed on this issue, and this is then our proposal. This would then, of course, be a resolution, an omnibus resolution at ICCM 5, and we would very much then welcome your views on this proposal, which is then not, I mean, it's not a proposal as such, but it's sort of a way forward from our side. And with that, I think there is no time for comments, unfortunately, but we will welcome those in writing. And then, Sam, I think over to you to close the meeting.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Thank you, participants, for your kind attention and endurance. I think, by and large, we have done a lot of discussion today, and we are coming to the end of our meeting. So the next steps, next slide, please. that we want to do is that now we are about to finalize our efforts to complete our mandates as a group, me and Thomas. And today's discussion, actually, you have given a lot of issues to take on board. So we will look at the issues of concern, the process, session 3, and also try to match our progress from today and the last meeting on December 14th into the proposal for existing cycle, emerging policies and issues of concern. But as has been indicated, we would like to give you opportunity to submit comments by Friday. I think Friday, is it 22nd? Yes, 22nd January, and then latest, and then we can, to help us to do our work. And perhaps we are proposing another meeting on the 2nd of February, where we will also come again and then have a discussion, and perhaps that will conclude our work. So I would like to thank you once again and ask Blenda to perhaps give us any final issues from the Secretariat, if there are any. Brenda, please.
Sure. Just to mention then that the slide that Thomas just referred to on agenda item 5 will be posted in the virtual working group chat, so you'll have that available. And then just to reiterate what Sam just said, we will welcome any further written submissions on both the slide for agenda item 5 that Thomas presented and on the proposal by Friday, just to reinforce what was said today on the call, and that there's a meeting now proposed, a final wrap-up meeting on the 2nd of February, so Tuesday, the 2nd of February. So I think that will be the chance then to finalize the co-chair's proposal or co-facilitator's proposal that will go forward to IP4 for consideration and actual negotiation. So no further announcements from our side, just to say that inputs will be welcomed by Friday, and we will send a follow-up email to all soon after.
Thank you, Brenda. So on behalf of my co-facilitator, Thomas, thank you once again. And then we meet on the 2nd, but expecting your comments by Friday. So I wish you good morning, good afternoon, good night, and enjoy. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.